In the bustling streets where compassion often takes a back seat, two police officers, Michael and Peter, found themselves at the crossroads of fate and kindness. Their chance encounter with a hungry young woman among the homeless sparked a story that would echo through the years. Little did they know that the simple act of offering her a pizza would set in motion a chain of events that would come full circle. In the heart of the city, where the hustle and bustle of daily life often drowned out the cries for help, two dedicated police officers, Michael and Peter, embarked on their routine patrol. The streets were alive with activity, people rushing to work, others lost in their own world as they streamed back to their homes. It was just another day in their unending beat, but they carried with them a silent vigilance, ever watchful for the unseen faces that dwelled in the shadows. As their patrol car meandered through the urban labyrinth, Michael, the senior of the two, steered the vehicle with a practiced ease. He had been on the force long enough to know the streets like the lines on his palm, recognizing the subtle shifts in the city's rhythm. Peter, his younger partner, leaned forward in his seat, peering out of the passenger window. His sharp eyes scanned the sidewalks, seeking any signs of distress or danger among the people who called the streets their home. Months of patrolling this area had honed their senses, allowing them to distinguish the regulars from the newcomers. The homeless souls who often sought refuge along this stretch of pavement became familiar faces, and any deviation from the norm immediately caught their attention. On this particular day, as they continued their vigilant rounds, Peter's keen eyes spotted a deviation from the usual tableau of despair. A young woman, sitting a few steps apart from a small group of homeless women, stood out like a beacon in the gloom of the street. The officers exchanged a quick glance, silently acknowledging the curiosity that had piqued both their interests. It was not her presence alone that intrigued them, but the stark contrast she presented against the backdrop of worn-out cardboard, ragged blankets, and downtrodden souls. The young woman's hair was surprisingly well-groomed, her clothing clean and relatively new. In her hands, she held a book with an intensity that suggested her life depended on its pages. She appeared out of place, like a rare wildflower amidst a field of weeds. Peter, ever inquisitive, leaned closer to Michael and nodded in the direction of the young woman. "Something's off here," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the city. Michael followed Peter's gaze, his experienced eyes taking in the scene. "You might be onto something, partner," he replied with a hint of intrigue. "She doesn't quite fit the profile of a typical street dweller. She could be one of those volunteers or activists, but there's definitely a story behind those eyes." As the officers contemplated their next move, unaware of the remarkable journey that lay ahead, the mysterious young woman continued to read her book, seemingly oblivious to the world around her. Little did they know that this chance encounter with her would set in motion a series of events that would forever change their lives. The following day dawned just like any other for Michael and Peter as they embarked on their daily patrol routine. Their minds were tinged with curiosity and a hint of anticipation, for they secretly hoped to encounter the enigmatic young woman once more. As they approached the familiar stretch of sidewalk where the homeless found their temporary solace, both officers strained their eyes, searching for a trace of the girl who had captured their attention the previous day. The sun bathed the city with its warm embrace, and the streets were teeming with life, oblivious to the stories that unfolded in the shadows. And then, as if by some serendipitous twist of fate, she was there again. The young woman sat in the same spot, her eyes fixed on an elderly man among the homeless, who was in the midst of devouring a humble turkey sandwich. Her gaze was intense, her expression a blend of longing and empathy. Michael's heart tugged as he watched her. It was as though she found solace in observing the simple act of someone enjoying a meal, an act most people took for granted. The old man, named Connor, sensed her attention but could not decipher the complex emotions in her eyes. Feeling self-conscious, he furrowed his brow, gently set his sandwich down, and shuffled away to a different spot, wanting to savor his meal in peace. The other homeless individuals in the vicinity noticed the young woman's focused attention on Connor and began to cast curious glances her way. An uncomfortable silence fell upon the small gathering as the girl lowered her head, hiding her face behind a curtain of chestnut hair. Unable to bear the weight of the collective gaze, she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling. Tears streamed down her cheeks, staining her pristine clothes. Peter's heart ached for her. He had a niece around her age, and the sight of her vulnerability struck a chord deep within him. "Hungry man, look at her," Peter murmured to Michael, his voice filled with empathy and concern. "Look at her eyes, they're filled with so much pain." Michael nodded in agreement, his eyes never leaving the scene before them. He glanced at his wristwatch, realizing that it was approaching lunchtime. An idea began to form in his mind. He knew what they needed to do. "Let's do something about it," Michael said decisively. He opened the car door and stepped out onto the pavement, while Peter, though unsure of his partner's intentions, followed suit. The girl, still lost in her sorrow, had not noticed the approaching officers. They stood a few feet away, observing her silently. Michael decided it was time to break the ice. "Hello, miss," he began gently, his tone devoid of any threat. "We noticed that you might be hungry, so we brought you something to eat." Michael extended a pizza box toward her, the scent of its warm contents wafting through the air. Startled, the young woman slowly raised her head, her tear-stained face meeting the kind eyes of the officers. Her body tensed, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. How long had they been standing there? Were they here to arrest her or go through her belongings? Peter, sensitive to her unease, reassured her. "There's no need to be afraid," he said, his voice soft and soothing. "We noticed you were hungry, so we got you something to eat. Here, have this." Many watched in disbelief as one of the officers opened the pizza box, revealing a steaming slice of pizza. Her initial fear gradually melted into gratitude, and she finally managed a feeble but heartfelt "thank you." As the officers turned to leave, they left the pizza with her, not expecting any acknowledgement or thanks in return. Their mission was simple: to offer a moment of reprieve from the harsh realities of life on the streets. Driving away from the scene, the two officers shared a warm feeling in their hearts. It was a feeling of fulfillment, a reminder of the power of a small act of kindness. They hoped that this simple gesture might bring a glimmer of hope into the life of a young woman who had been touched by their compassion. Little did they know that this encounter would mark the beginning of a remarkable bond that would span years and weave their stories together in unexpected ways. The sun dipped below the city's towering skyscrapers, casting long shadows that stretched across the streets. Another day's patrol had come to an end for Michael and Peter. As they made their way back to the precinct, thoughts of the mysterious young woman lingered in the corners of their minds. Their curiosity about her had only deepened since their chance encounter. Both officers wondered about her story, her circumstances, and what had brought her to the streets of their city. However, their duties called, and they had to focus on their responsibilities, hoping that they would cross paths with her again someday. The next morning, as they resumed their patrol, their gaze was once again drawn to the same stretch of sidewalk. It had become a routine for them, a silent agreement to keep an eye out for the young woman who had touched their hearts with her vulnerability. Yet, as they approached the familiar spot, she was conspicuously absent. The other homeless individuals seemed to be going about their daily routines, but the girl, who had been a beacon of intrigue, was nowhere to be seen. Peter, perplexed by her sudden disappearance, approached a few people who frequented the area. He inquired about her, hoping to glean any information that might lead them to her whereabouts. The homeless community, although hesitant to share details about their own lives, could provide no insight into her sudden vanishing act. "She was here yesterday," one man grumbled, scratching his scruffy beard. "But today? I don't know, officer. Maybe she moved on." The officers exchanged knowing glances but didn't press further. The transient nature of life on the streets meant that people often came and went without warning. They had to respect her privacy, even if they longed to understand her story. Days turned into weeks, and then into months. Michael and Peter continued their daily patrols, their dedication to their duty unwavering. The streets remained a harsh and unforgiving place for the homeless, a constant reminder of the challenges that life could pose. Time passed, and the memory of the enigmatic young woman began to fade. They encountered countless faces, each with its own story of hardship and resilience. Life on the streets was a relentless struggle, and the officers did their best to offer help where they could. In the midst of their demanding roles as law enforcement officers, Michael and Peter couldn't help but wonder what had become of the girl who had left such a lasting impression on them. They had offered her a small gesture of kindness, and she, in turn, had touched their hearts with her tears and vulnerability. As the years rolled on, the young woman's absence remained a mystery, but the city continued to move, its rhythms undisturbed by the unanswered questions that lingered in the minds of two officers who had crossed paths with a fleeting, unforgettable presence. Years rolled by and Michael and Peter progressed in their careers as police officers. The memory of the mysterious young woman who had touched their hearts had become a bittersweet fragment of the past. Despite the passing of time, they continued their afternoon patrols with the same dedication they had always shown. One sunny afternoon, the duo drove along their regular route, their patrol car meandering through the city streets. As they approached the familiar stretch of sidewalk where they had first encountered the enigmatic young woman, they noticed something out of the ordinary. A sleek black luxury car had pulled up to the curb, drawing their attention. Michael, ever observant, pointed it out. "Looks like someone's about to make the day for these homeless folks," he remarked, a hint of anticipation in his voice. It was not uncommon for well-off individuals to extend a helping hand to those less fortunate, especially during the spring cleaning season. However, as they watched the car's tinted window slide down, neither officer was prepared for the unexpected sight that awaited them. Out stepped a woman with well-groomed hair, elegantly dressed in a white leather jacket and a long black skirt. Her demeanor exuded both wealth and sophistication, a stark contrast to the destitution that surrounded her. Peter, unable to contain his surprise, was the first to break the silence. "Wait a minute," he muttered, squinting at the woman's face. "Aren't you the homeless girl who was here all those years ago?" Both officers exchanged incredulous glances, their memories rushing back like a tidal wave. The woman nodded, her eyes brimming with recognition. "Yes, it's me," she replied softly. "I was living the worst week of my life back then." She continued to explain her harrowing experience from years ago. "I had just arrived in the city, dreamy-eyed and 2 days away from my first year at the State University. But the moment I got off the bus, my luggage and phone were stolen. I had nowhere to go. I come from a tiny town and I knew no one." The officers listened intently, their hearts heavy with empathy. They understood the harsh realities that newcomers often faced in the city, the vulnerability of being alone and homeless. "I struggled even to convince someone to lend me their phone for a minute so I could call my worried parents," she continued. "Everyone stared at me because I was overdressed for a homeless person. A couple of photographers passing by even took a picture of me sitting with the others, as if I was some sort of painting." Michael and Peter looked around, taking in the bustling cityscape. People walked by, indifferent to the homeless individuals who blended into the urban backdrop, invisible to the masses. "You know," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "when I saw that police car stopping by, all those scary police stories I'd heard since childhood came rushing to my mind. I would literally have gone hungry rather than approached you for help. That's how scared I was." The officers exchanged a knowing look, their expressions filled with understanding. They were well aware of the negative stereotypes and fears that often surrounded law enforcement. "But you officers walked up with a pizza and changed everything," she continued, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "I finally got something to eat, got some clarity, and figured out a way out of the mess. We had no idea you were going through all that. Had we known, we could have helped you more." Peter nodded, deeply moved by her words. "We're just happy to see that we helped," he replied sincerely. The woman smiled warmly at the officers, her eyes reflecting a sense of closure and gratitude. "Now that I'm finally a doctor and can afford it," she said, "I want to return your kindness. I had a hunch I'd find you here at this time, so I drove up to give you this." She reached into her car and brought out a neatly wrapped dish containing an apple pie. "Pizza for a pie, huh?" Michael joked with a grin. The officers were touched by her gesture, grateful for her acknowledgement of their small act of kindness years ago. However, she had one more surprise in store for them. "Look under the pie," she urged mysteriously. Michael and Peter obliged, lifting the pie to discover a travel brochure tucked underneath. It was a map, one she referred to as her lucky map, from the time when she had dreamt of becoming a doctor and traveling the world. "I want you to point out any place on it," she said with a generous smile, "and I'll sponsor an all-expenses-paid trip for you and your families to visit there." The officers were left speechless, overwhelmed by her kindness and generosity. The young woman had not only found her own path to success, but had also returned to offer a helping hand to those who had once extended one to her in her time of need. As they stood there, the bustling city as their backdrop, they realized that life's journey often led to unexpected intersections, where acts of compassion and gratitude could bridge the gaps between strangers, creating bonds that transcended time and circumstance. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and this other story that may be appearing on the screen will most likely move you as well. Have a nice day and see you in the next video.